You've heard the pitch. Buy this unit and the tenant will pay your mortgage and you will be able to grow your net worth for free. Agents love to boast about a 4% rental yield, but I'm here to tell you that that number is often a facade. In 2026, the Singapore rental market has shifted. If you are still using face value math, you are not just leaving money on the table, you might be bleeding it through expenses slick you haven't even calculated yet. And to understand where we are going, we have to look at where we have been. Between 2014 and 2020, the Singapore rental market was in a brutal slump. Looking at the rental price index, prices remained flat for 6 years, and referencing our residential dwellings data, it shows a massive spike in completions during this period, specifically in the 2014 to 2018 period. More condos and BTOs hit the market than ever before. At the same time, the non-resident population, your primary tenant pool, stagnated due to tightening manpower policies. It was simply a tenant's heaven because there were simply more homes than tenants available. And this alongside with Singapore's constant tightening of foreign manpower. And don't forget, these were the years where the Singapore government was also rolling out cooling measures aggressively, and then creating what we are seeing here, a stabilized property market. And by the way, this data is all from Singstat, so it's actually available to anyone if you're keen to look at it. And speaking of data, if you like looking at data, consider subscribing to this channel because we will be going through a lot of analysis of real estate in our videos. And so in 2020, just when you think everything is good and well, chaos is unleashed. COVID happened. And the truth is, during COVID, what happened wasn't just a spike in demand, but rather a limitation of physical manpower and construction. Even though we see the non-resident population drop here, what was happening on the ground was companies sourcing for houses for their Malaysian workers. And this was because during that period, there were a lot of cross-border difficulties, if you recall what happened. And so with companies entering the rental market, you have corporations out there willing to pay above market rate so that they can retain their workers in Singapore. And that eventually led to the rise in rental prices that we see today. With construction delays as well, and with the population still growing, the spike in demand meant that the supply faced a crunch. And people had to rent whatever was out there in the market, unable to rely on new properties coming up and competing with all those overpaying corporations. And so now, learning from the past and fast forward to today, let's take a look at the charts again. It seems like rental rates have stabilized even with population still growing steadily. Although most of this is due to the non-resident population, no thanks to Singaporeans. So it does seem like the rental market has a cap on how much rental is too much after all. I'm not saying that rental rates will fall all the way back to the 2014 to 2020 period levels, especially since the market has been used to these new rental price norms. But people seem to have forgotten that rental markets in Singapore have been a slump comparatively to what we've seen in the past 5 years. I would say that now, take it with a pinch of salt, be a bit more prudent with your asking prices and don't expect people to snap up your unit immediately like the COVID period. And also with HDB and developers going all out to meet the housing needs of Singapore, the supply has caught up to demand. And to be honest, the more we talk about this, the more it seems like this is really an intriguing topic, but we will have to leave this for another video one day. Anyway, for now, that's enough context for what we're actually doing here today, breaking down the rental ROI on investment properties. I'm ASAP, and today we break down the math and uncover the truth behind rental properties. While agents may tell you don't worry, the rental will cover the mortgage and it's all good, some will even say blanket statements like renting out your property increases your net worth by 50,400 a year through 4,200 monthly rentals. And even the property guru adds that splash 4% rental yield on properties, enticing you think that it's a good deal. Maybe it's true and maybe it's not. While people may brush it off as holding costs or worse yet say things like
no choice ma, property is like that,
I beg to differ. Being aware of these leaking expenses or factors will help you make a decision whether a property is worth the investment outcome you're looking for. So similarly to the net profits video, we are going to list down factors that determine how much of your rental profits you're actually keeping. These factors are: number 1, bank interest, which is the cost of leveraging. Although we always say that buying property is a form of forced savings, you must be clear that your mortgage isn't entirely going towards your principal amount. Number 2, agent fees for renting out the property is usually 1 month rent for 2-year lease. Number 3, property tax. A non-owner occupied tax rate can be a real kicker when you're you're renting out your property. Number 4, income tax. Rental income adds on to your existing income, meaning that you could be elevated into the 20% tax bracket simply by renting out your property. Number 5, maintenance fee. It is after all still your property, so you will have to continue paying maintenance fees while renting it out. And number 6, miscellaneous costs. And of course, this is a very broad statement, but this could include small amounts like handyman work or bigger amounts like replacing the entire aircon system in your unit. And for rental ROI calculations, we will be adopting the purist approach 100% of the time here. This is because you are definitely not going to be staying at a unit, and this is a pure investment. You can refer to the previous video here for the explanations between a purist and a realist comparison. And for the first example, let's borrow John again from the other video. John once again is a single person that loves staying at his parents' home to enjoy free food and lodging. At 35 years old, earning $10,000 a month, he decides to buy a 3-bedroom resale condo as an investment. And now to be specific, let's use Coco Palm's 3-bedroom 915 square feet as an example. He buys it for $1.5 million. He takes a 75% loan at $1.125 million for 30 years at a 2% interest rate. Upon completion of the property, he immediately rents it out for $4,200 for 2 years. And in case you're wondering, yes, these are legitimate transactions based on the transaction data for Coco Palms. I am trying to replicate a real-life scenario with a real-life transaction to factor in these factors. So now let's list down these 6 factors. Number 1, we have interest at $43,937 for 2 years. Number 2, agent fees, which would be 1 month plus GST at $4,578 for 2 years. And number 3, assuming that the annual value of this property is $40,000, the non-owner occupied tax rate would be $5,600 for a year, so $11,200 for 2 years. Number 4, income tax. He was already at the 11.5% bracket, paying $7,950. With this new rental income, he is now elevated to the 18% tax bracket, paying $15,882. The difference in cost here is $7,932 for 1 year, and so $15,864 for 2 years. Number 5, maintenance fees, $400 a month, so $9,600 for 2 years. And number 6, miscellaneous costs. Maybe this time round he has to replace the entire aircon system in the house and repaint it for the tenant because he's buying it as a resale unit. So we'll just count this as $7,000 under miscellaneous. And if you add them all up together, you will get $92,179 in expenses for renting out this property for 2 years, or $46,089 a year, which averages out to $3,841 a month. And so if John decides to rent it out at $4,200 after considering all the expenses, he will be pocketing, whether it's in his bank account or principal payments via his mortgage, a total of $359 a month or $4,308 a year. If you use the blanket statement of $4,200 directly adding to your net worth, you will have a face value of $50,400 a year. But the reality in this example is not even 10% of the blanket statement. Now let's take a look at another example. John is again a single person who loves staying at his parents' house to enjoy free lodging and food. At 35 years old, earning $10,000 a month, this time round he decides to buy a 2-bedroom new launch condo as an investment. And here is where I have to use a specific example, if not you're all gonna say, where got 1.5 million 2-bedroom in today's market. So the example I have here is a Springleaf Residences 2-bed 2-bath 646 square feet unit at 1.5 million. The top floor unit facing Springleaf Forest because, I don't know, John just likes nature perhaps. He takes a 75% loan at 1.125 for 30 years at a 2% interest rate. 4 years later, the condo obtains TOP. He collects the keys and this time he decides to rent it out instead of selling to avoid the TOP market saturation. He then finds a tenant who is willing to rent the place for $4,200 for 2 years. Now let's list down these 6 factors again. Number 1, interest is a bit more complicated to count because this is a new launch. So for the first year's interest interest, we will count it as $17,205 because the condo hasn't achieved CSC. And for the second year's interest, we will count it as $21,231 because the loan would have been fully dispersed by then. And the interest for this segment would total up to $38,436 for 2 years. Number 2, agent fees will be 1 month plus GST again, which amounts to $4,578 for 2 years. And number 3, property tax, assuming the annual value is $33,000, the non-owner occupied rates would be $4,200 a year or $8,400 for 2 years. And number 4, income tax. He was already in the 11.5% bracket, paying $7,950. With this new rental income, which was similar to the previous example, his difference would be $7,932 for 1 year and $15,864 for 2 years. And number 5, maintenance fee, $400 a month, same as the other example, $9,600 for 2 years. Miscellaneous costs, this time round, we will count it as $3,000 for installing the lights and providing furnitures. Because this is a new launch, it will be renovated, but you will still have to put in your own lights, or depending on the rental amount you get and the tenant requests. Like in this case, they decided to opt in for furnitures. And so you add them all up, you will get $79,878 in expenses this time for renting out the property. This breaks down to $39,939 a year, which averages out to $3,328 a month, slightly cheaper than the first example. And so in this example, if John decides to rent out at $4,200 after expenses, he will be pocketing in his bank account or principal payments via mortgage a total of $872 a month or $10,464 a year. Again, a far cry from the blanket statement of $50,400 in net worth or even the claims of 4% rental yield. So why are we taking the time and effort to do all of these calculations? It's because in the current climate of high rental rates and low interest, it is very easy to overlook the potential pitfalls in property investments. But what if one day the situation flips, rental rates drop and interest rates rise? Which is why fundamentally counting these factors is the most definite way to know whether a property is investment worthy or not. Now, for those of you who are wondering how does this formula merge with our previous net profits formula, let's merge it with what we've learned so far. In that video, we learned that face value profits minus entry cost minus recurring cost minus exit cost gives you the net profits. So the easiest way to see this is if you're renting your property, your tenant is actually bearing your recurring costs. Meaning, take for an example, John buying the 3-bedroom condo at $1.5 million and rents it out for 4 years and decides to sell it at $1.8 million later. His calculations will look something like this. The face value profit minus the entry cost, which includes his BSD, agent fee and legal fees. This part minus or add the recurring costs depending on your rental calculations. In this case, we will use John's example 1, so it's a positive gain, right? So plus the recurring cost, which is what we earn from the rental, minus the exit cost, which is selling agent fee and legal fee. And that gives him his ultimate net profit. And so if you put everything in the formula, you will get a total of $212,042. If you are unsure of what we are talking about here today, you can refer to this video explaining on how to calculate the net profits for your property. And now the moment of truth. How do we put these earnings into an ROI percentage? Look at properties like a dividend stock. You put your money there and it yields you returns over the years. Meaning, like in example 1, John buying the $1.5 million resale with a 25% down payment of $375, he will be pocketing $359 a month or $4,308 a year, which means his annual yield on that $375,000 he placed down is 1.1%. And if we take example 2, John, with the same down payment of $375,000, he will be pocketing a total of $872 a month or $10,464 a year, which means his annual yield on the $375,000 placed down is 2.7%. When we put these earnings into a percentage, we aren't just looking at the rental yield, we are actually looking for the cash on cash return. And some people may argue that you should be adding entry costs into the initial deposit, but doing that creates a moving target that makes tracking your performance tedious. We treat the down payment as your static capital and the entry, recurring and exit costs as the cost of investment. This is the cleaner, more transparent way to see your actual net gains. And of course, at the end of the day when you sell your property, remember to use the net profits calculations to offset the entry, recurring, and exit costs. I guess one way to see it is that property is somewhat like a stock that pays out dividends, and you will only see a loss if you sell it lower than your break-even price after factoring in your cost of investment. This video is to give you a glimpse and also perhaps a guide on how to count your rental yields factually and then merging it all with the net profits formula when you decide to exit. I'm not suggesting that renting out an investment property is bad strategy. In fact, it's an excellent strategy for holding out when your property price isn't increasing to your expectations right now. But relying exclusively just on rental income is often a trap, and even more so when the rental income doesn't cover your mortgage in the coming years. And while smaller units are the obvious rental yield choice on paper, you will see ads like this online boasting of 4% rental yield for one bedroom, which we have just debunked anyway in this video. A 4% paper yield is useless if the market doesn't even have the buyer pool to help you cash out at your break-even price. And these potential smaller units may eventually grant you the 4% rental yield, but they often lack the exit liquidity of larger homes like a 3 to 4 bedroom unit. And so smarter investors in 2026 look beyond just the monthly rental. They study the supply and demand delta to ensure that they earn from rental income today but win even bigger on capital appreciation tomorrow. And if you have any questions or require assistance in the calculations or want the Google Sheet to calculate this, drop me a text at 96971000 and I will send it over. And as usual, if you love content like this and factual data regarding real estate, subscribe to this channel. We release videos weekly on real estate matters. I'm ASAP and I will see you in the next video.